Thanks, Kelly. So I wanted to let you hear from your marketplace because that's incredibly important. I think, we typically think about our operations and often lose sight of what happens when markets that we sell into start to transform themselves. And I'm gonna have to rethink the whole journey thing because we always talk about digital transformation as a journey. And what did you say? Nobody's taking pictures along the way. Got to remember that one. So what I'd like to do is start the panel portion of this. And I'd like to welcome Steve Pullins, who's the CTO of AlphaStructure, which is an energy as a service provider company. And also Liz Stuck, who's Vice President of MXD Learn. You come join us on the stage. Thank you. Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Steve. I like these nice, comfy chairs. I cannot tell you, it's awesome. So let's do this quickly. Kelly, you introduced yourself already. Liz, if you can just introduce yourself, what you do, what your role is, what MXD's role is, and Steve, if you could do the same. Start there.
Sure, thank you. So my name is Liz Stuck, and I'm the Vice President for Workforce Development at MXD. The program is called MXD Learn. For those who have not heard of us, which I suspect are many in the room, MXD is a digital manufacturing and cybersecurity for manufacturing institute based in Chicago, Illinois. We are in large part funded by the U.S. Department of Defense to come up with and collaborate with industry and academia and other partners to identify solutions in digital for manufacturing and cybersecurity for manufacturing. My role as the head of the workforce program is to think about what are the skills and the training needs that go along with the adoption and implementation of these technologies. So we look at everything from what kind of roles and skills and training is going to be required to what exists currently, where are the gaps, where do we need to develop content and curriculum, and then from there, how do we offer accessibility to a broad audience of potential partners in terms of uptake in these curriculum? Is that through apprenticeships? Is it through internships? Is it through train-the-trainer programs and workshops? So we're looking at the whole spectrum of workforce development solutions from sort of that definition stage to the doing stage across digital and cybersecurity for manufacturing.
Thanks. Steve?
Steve Pullins, I'm the Senior Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at AlphaStructure. So AlphaStructure is a joint venture between a global private equity firm, Carlyle Group, which is about $360 billion, and Schneider Electric, another global firm, and I think most of you know, but that's a electrical technology and services company. And our role as AlphaStructure is to fund and design, build, own, and operate on-site energy systems for large commercial, large industrial operations. So kind of changing a little bit of the dynamic around that energy supply that typically comes from either existing on-site sources or from the grid. And doing this with our capital instead of the customer's capital. The idea, that's the energy as a service business model. More than just AlphaStructure does this. And but it's a way to help the customers keep a focus on their core missions and let some of the transformation issues around energy and the related sustainability needs move to somebody else taking that risk and helping make that transformation.
Great, thanks. And just a quick thing, if anybody wants to ask questions, please, as anybody who knows me, I love to have interactions. So if we can get some mic runners in the back, that would be fantastic. And if you'd like to join the debate, ask a question, share your thoughts, please just raise your hand. We'll have somebody come around to give you a microphone. So let's start here. I want to begin with competencies. So we had talked about innovation, we had talked about market and workforce itself, and workforce to me raises the idea of competencies. So let's look at this first from the macro level of energy, because energy is typically seen as a competency that is incredibly important for a manufacturing operation to function. And letting that go, I think, is probably a difficult decision to get to. So let's start there, and then Liz, what we'll do is look at competencies maybe with the intersection of digital transformation and sustainability. So Steve, if you could really address how companies view energy as a competency and what that thought process is as they start to think about, is that something I need to own, or is there a better way to derive that competency?
That's a really tough one, because
that's why we're here.
Yes, it's true that when you're in an industrial or a large commercial complex, that there's typically a very substantial energy competency that exists. I would say that often we find when we go in and we start working with the facilities people and the C-level as well, we find that there's some of that competency is a little dated. And as we have the nexus of both sustainability and digital transformation and the advent of a lot of new technologies that are in this space, there's new competencies that have to be developed. That is a difficult thing, and it competes for time and resources with the day-to-day, and then what other things you're trying to develop as new core competencies around your products, your services, and things like that. So let's call that core mission. So in a way, what we see is that energy is being relegated to not a core competency anymore, but a core service. So it's not necessarily something that you have to retain internally as a competency as part of your core mission. Now, that sometimes is hard to hear, and the truth is that your core mission is the products, the services, the processes that you operate, and energy is an enabling feature of that. So it's what we find is that when we go in and we are talking to C-level and facility managers around their commercial operations or their industrial operations, is that they do have a competency and they understand that, and then all of the ideas that they have and how they're going to transform their energy landscape is all vested in those technologies that they already have. So it's incremental around what they already have. And what we see is that when you start playing that out in the sustainability landscape, the reliability landscape, the resilience landscape, and the long-term cost predictability or stability landscape, that many of those existing technologies with the incremental improvements just don't measure up. So something more transformational has to take place to meet these new objectives and to live in the world of sustainability and live in the world of digital transformation and to live in the world of improving reliability so that you can reduce losses at your facility. You have to start considering a whole different suite of technologies to go along, energy technologies to go along with what you already have. So it's a blending, it's a hybridization of that new energy landscape. So that's the competency that has to be, new competency that has to be built. And then new choices come from that. Whether you take that competency on yourself 100% as a company, or whether you share that with a trusted partner who's going to, under a long-term agreement, who's going to take that risk off your plate, or things like that.
Sure. So let's take that down to the macro level, more to the individual level, Liz, around new competency, skill sets, expertise. It's interesting that a few years ago, I was having a conversation with a chief technology officer of a major energy company, and this person indicated to me, I'm so used to throwing engineers at a problem, and that's how I solve my problems. His conclusion was, I don't need more engineers. I need economists. I need people who can figure out different ways to move money to get me to what I need to do, because that's what I have to transform to. That's just an example. Can you talk about what you've seen? Because you've been so involved in developing ideas around roles and expertise for digital transformation. What have you seen with digital transformation that you think maybe intersects with sustainability? Can you talk to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So I think there are a couple of important things to take in consideration, and I have to say, as I mentioned in the intro, we're the Digital Manufacturing Institute and Cybersecurity for Manufacturing Institute, and the sustainability piece has really been thrust upon us in the last few years as we are hearing about it more and more from our partners. And the early stages of these discussions for myself, I thought, oh no, I don't even have my arms around digital completely yet. How are we going to be thinking about sustainability too? And I hope that doesn't take away confidence in the comments I'm about to make now. But I think there are a couple things. Digital is the unlock for sustainability. And so as we are thinking about work and skill sets, I don't actually think we're as far afield from what we need as at least initially I feared. We work very closely with a group out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin called Manpower Group, and they recently surveyed about 40,000 organizations they work with. Of those 40,000, 43% had sustainability plans, but only 6% felt they had the workforce needed to get to those sustainability goals or those sustainability plans. And so the question becomes, well, what does the workforce need to look like? And this is a question we asked ourselves in 2014 and 15 around digital, and in 2018 and 19 around cybersecurity. And now we're going back and saying, okay, based on what we found, the 400 different roles that we have identified, which ones are most closely aligned with what we're hearing from industry on the needs around sustainability planning? And there are a couple key things. One is I feel that there really is a need to take a different approach to how we do education. This is going to continue to evolve very rapidly, just as we saw with digital, just as we're seeing with cybersecurity. So there's not a one-size-fits-all. There's not going to be sort of a menu of these are the workers you need, and this will work for any business. It's going to have to be customized based on the unique organization needs, which means there's going to need to be flexibility in how we approach learning and education and continuous learning and continuous education opportunities. So I think the role that the Institute hopes to play in some of this and what we're going to be doing based on what we've heard from our employer partners is, how do we create a roadmap or a blueprint that helps to identify some of the top needs as it relates to sustainability and digital roles, and how then can we create enough information, provide enough information that employers feel they can start to figure out who within their workforce is the right fit.
Sure. It's interesting because I'm seeing a little bit over the last couple of years of so much of the emphasis that has been put into STEM education and trying to matriculate people up into that and into the workforce. I actually think you're starting to see it happen here. And the same thing has to happen with sustainability, where you have to understand its different skill set, and we have to get those people into the market. So let me ask maybe Kelly to have you join the conversation here. Can you tell us what it's been like for the clients you serve to go through the process of getting serious about sustainability from a standpoint of what changed in the organization itself? And the reason why I want to ask that is because that then has to trickle down to the people that are selling to them. Can you just give us some thoughts about what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, am I on? All right. And I didn't get a chance to really introduce what Scout Sourcing does. So we are a certified woman-owned company that brings sustainable paper and packaging solutions. So we collaborate very closely with companies in order to identify needs and then find best-in-class manufacturer or manufacturers and piece together a logistics or distribution program to meet those needs. And so, Mike, what it looks like for these organizations is they're in flux right now. Their organizational structure is all over the place. And so I think at one point it was, hey, you seem like a good guy and you're really nice. You'd be really good as a sustainability guy, you know? So, and they give you a title and you're like, you're the sustainability guy now. Go off and make good things happen for us. And how's it going? To now companies really recognizing that they have to completely change the way they look at this. And there's a couple different structures, whether it be a sustainability team that collaborates with procurement or with operations, or whether it be sustainability leads within each part of an organization, whether it be pillars, whether it be centers of excellence. So every different company is structuring it differently, but it is really requiring employers to take a look at who they're hiring and what expertise they're bringing into the organization, because based on the speed in which this is evolving, they're not going to be able to do it with their existing staff.
Yeah, it's interesting that you make that comment, because that's the same thing that I'm seeing where, hey, you've been around in the organization for a while, you know it, why don't you just take on this role? And it really requires, I think, as you would know, Liz and Steve with Energy as well, that it's a different set of competencies and you have to be serious about getting them into the business. One of the things that I wonder, Liz, if you can maybe share with us how that occurred with digital transformation, where it was the same thing, where there was this idea of, oh, we've got to do these things, learn about these technologies, into, oh, this is organizational rethink. We not only have to change and reskill who we have, but we have to start bringing in new competencies. Can you discuss how that really crystallized in, say, chief digital officers a lot and centers of excellence, and what people can expect, you know, building on what Kelly said?
Absolutely. So I have been with the Institute now for 8 years, and before that was working in manufacturing on the policy side of things. And in the early stages of my role with the Institute, we would talk with our industry partners around workforce development, and there was general agreement, yes, we've got to do something, we've got a problem here. And when I would ask, well, how much of the budget should we put towards some of those workforce solutions? The answer was, oh, no, don't take any of the money from R&D. We need that. We're going to find other money for this, which is what we have done. But I have seen a significant shift in how we are discussing workforce needs with industry partners, where it was sort of a nice to have almost, into I have to do this now. I should have done it a couple of years ago. And I think that as we think about this from a sustainability skill set standpoint now, there's a much better awareness of how can we get ahead of this to the extent we can still get ahead of it, and more willingness to have the discussions across an organization. I was in one of the sessions yesterday and somebody asked the question, how did you get leadership to listen to you when you started to talk to them about digital twins? And the response was, well, I didn't use the word digital twin. And so I think that there's something to be said for thinking about this in a way that continues to talk about the business case, the business impact, the opportunity, some of the points that were made earlier by Kelly around how businesses are going to remain competitive. It's the same thing we sort of shifted to as we started to talk about digital. This is going to be a requirement if we're going to remain competitive, and the same is going to be true as we look at sustainability in manufacturing and more broadly.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's reverse it. It's actually now micro, where now you're the micro example of what that change looks like when you apply it to a specific process. Can you tell me how, when a company realizes that this is the thing to do relative to energy, how do they change? And what mistakes do they do that should be avoided, and what does good look like?
I think if you look at us as a micro example of this changing landscape, we had to go through the same processes of building new competencies in the sustainability area, and then of course in our energy technology area. But we had to not forget all of the financial aspects and what is, what makes a good sustainability solution, right? Because they don't all pencil, right? So you have to have you have to marry these very diverse skill sets, and that was it took us 2 years to learn that.
Yeah.
In our own company, and we couldn't effectively communicate that to other companies, right? Scratching our heads, why aren't we making progress here? Well, because we didn't have that skill firmly entrenched and ability to talk across the aspects of how does this particular strategy around energy and sustainability pencil better than this other one. And we had to be able to articulate those differences, or else how can we possibly expect somebody else in our supply chain downstream to understand that if we can't articulate it for ourselves and for that space. So I think that was a really early lesson that we learned. The other thing that came along with that is that we learned that all things commercial, industrial, and this is our view, so I would be happy to hear alternative views, all comes down to 4 objectives. And every company has these 4 objectives. They have a reliability of operations. They have sustainability, the ability to withstand challenges, external and internal. They have the ability to generate, or they have the desire to generate a stable cost picture so that they can work all the aspects of their business. And 4th, sustainability. Everybody has different weightings for those 4, and everybody has different priorities for those 4, but those 4 are always there. And one of the things that we learned, in my experience, dates back doing this for the last 20 years, and from our discussions with customers, is that sometimes sustainability is number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes reliability is number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes resilience is number 1. Cost and cost stability is always number 1 or number 2.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay? And so that kind of theme was through everything that we learned about how we deliver, and it was also true in all of our discussions with all of our customers, that's our downstream.
Sure. Okay. Any questions out here? Please jump in and feel free to discuss. Just raise your hand. Can we get a microphone up front? Yeah, but I'm not sure anybody else can. So Dan? Okay. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Brian.
I was just wondering if you could describe some of the specific skills that were developed, not just types of skills, but what actual competencies, needed to be developed or found or done, and then what projects or, what projects were those applied to specifically?
We talk cybersecurity all the time.
To me? Yeah. Okay, so skills around, first of all, knowledge of a broad base of electrical generation technologies and thermal generation technologies. So that broad base had to be there. The ability to understand the total cost of ownership over a lifetime of an asset that's 25, 35, 40 years of design life. And having the ability to look at all of that. So, and then understand the various aspects of those technologies, not only from the economics perspective, but then also from the sustainability perspective, or the amount of greenhouse gas contributions that each of those technologies. So those are some of that. But the marriage is, you have to have a deep understanding of scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. You have to have a deep understanding of how you financially model the different technologies and then the aggregate of those technologies that you're applying to a solution, because one technology does not fit all. You have to have multiple to address those 4 primary objectives. I hope that helps.
Well, the reason I ask is that, a lot of what people say are stuff they were already doing or should have been doing all along. I mean, almost all of the sustainability discussions I have with editorial sources are efficiency, and it's what they were already doing or should have been doing. And so what's the difference? What part of that is sustainability? Because if you're just doing the same thing you're always doing, nothing's going to. So it's what's the difference now?
I think part of that difference now is that there's when you're looking at sustainability, if you're looking at it from an incremental improvement perspective, then there's technologies and strategies that fit in that layer. If you're looking at, I need to cut half of my emissions over the next, by 2030, that's another layer of sustainable strategies that you need to employ, and that's more disruptive. But then when you look at the targets that we establish in corporations of 80% by 2040 and 100% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2050, and a lot of people are headed in those kinds of directions, that's another layer. And you don't get there from incremental change, a series of 20 years of incremental change. You have to rethink that strategy to address that layer between 50% reduction and 100% reduction. And that's where people need to go. And that strategy can be laid out, and it can be driven to in phases or increments. But if you don't understand where you're going, then you're setting your targets too low. And you end up doing the incremental change and then asking yourself in 23, how come I didn't realize such, what I thought I was going to realize?
So, question over here.
Hi, Amol Busari with Wood. So technology is going to be a key enabler for making sustainability economical. So are there examples of leaders in this area partnering to open source some of the proprietary technologies, or is there a forum or partnership where leaders in this area are getting together to make sustainability economical? Thank you.
You want to jump in on that one? Therein lies the problem. Liz, you probably.
Well, I do think, I don't know if I'm getting in trouble for making a plug for MXD here,
That's
but that
fine.
is
No.
certainly part of what we are doing, right? We 300 plus members in manufacturing industry and academia who are coming together to talk about these topics that are so large we really can't wrap our arms around them as one organization. So at the risk of making too blunt a point, that is a lot of what we are doing at the Institute, and that is a big part of why we exist. We know that these challenges around digital, around cybersecurity, around sustainability are enormous, and everybody's trying to figure out everything from what is the common vernacular that we're going to use, to what kind of technologies are going to be in place, to what kind of skill sets do we need. That's what we're doing.
And I think I'll go back to doing the maths again. 100 minus 17, that's what Sean's here for. I mean, that is what he is here for, is to find partnerships and put them together to a greater end. Certainly. Over here?
Yeah, Mark Duck with Shell. Question for Elizabeth. Can you help us understand more about the services around cybersecurity that you're offering?
And who was that for?
This Mark Duck with Shell.
Who was the question for him?
Elizabeth.
For anybody?
For me.
MDX, Elizabeth.
Oh, MXD, Liz?
Yes.
Yeah.
So so we are the National Center for Cybersecurity and Manufacturing as designated by the U.S. Department of Defense. And so our responsibility around cybersecurity for manufacturing is everything from how are companies to interpret CMMC and what is the status and how should we be thinking about this, to a cyber marketplace that we have that's available on our website for anyone who's interested in taking a look at it, with services and tools and technologies, to work we're doing ourselves to ensure our compliance and our cybersecurity, and then publishing the outcomes of that to say, here's the cyber playbook, here's what we have learned. And then my piece specifically then is around the workforce development components that go into that, the cybersecurity hiring guide, the cybersecurity for manufacturing operating technology courses that we've developed. So it runs from everything around sort of how are we thinking about this, how should manufacturers be approaching this, to what kind of technology exists, how should I assess my risk, and what kind of skills do I need in the workplace. And I be happy to talk with you or anyone else in more detail around some of the specific offerings that fit within each of those.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Let's back here, one last question, if we can run just behind Peter there.
I haven't heard a whole lot about ISO 50001, and so I was wondering about what your thoughts are on, I guess, adding more measurements, defining your significant energy users, creating an energy manager, and the aspects around that, and applying digital technologies to ISO 50001 to, I guess, improve your energy performance.
So you go ahead and take that one. To me, the interesting thing is I think we're so far away from standards at this point because this is so mushy at the edges. But you want to go ahead and jump in?
That was going to be my part of my comment is that this is we are still in the early formative stages of a lot of this. So, but having things standard based is where we need to head, and I think what we find is once we start moving in those standards, and 50,001 is not the only place to see some of this take place. It is that we start generating the ability to replicate. And what we see in the energy space is a need to take some of these new learned lessons and then replicate them specifically, and that's where the standards really start to sing.
So one last question over here, and then we'll
Yeah,
need to wrap.
and thank you very much. Honestly, it's not a question; it's an information here for the group, because I think we are all much further already. I'm representing the OPC Foundation. This is, together with CESP, the largest pool of standardized information models also for energy. And the technology OPCUA is in the largest wind turbine projects, water treatment, and right now in Northern Light to capture carbon. So there is already a platform. There is already the world's largest group with more than 900 members, including everybody of the who's who from North America here. And that's a platform already establishing projects actively. So we are much further already. Please take that as a note.
Great, thanks. So maybe 20 to 30 second last comments of your choosing. Start with you, Kelly.
Yeah, one of the questions I get asked a lot of times is, what does good look like from a manufacturing perspective? And I would say there's a good, better, best model. So typically what I see manufacturers come to the table might be a good, which is an alternative product or service that's more sustainable than something else. Paper versus plastic, something like that. Better would be manufacturers that are investing in a complete different workflow in order to produce the material. So there are manufacturers that are driving recycling trucks and picking up recycling, selling the parts they don't use, burning the waste to create clean energy in order to power a mill that's then producing the information to go back out. So that's better. And then best, I would say, would be a combination of the two, companies that are producing products or services in a very sustainable method. So that's one of the questions I get
Great.
asked.
Thank you.
So there's a recent Smart Industry report that says the adoption of digital means that profitability and sustainability are no longer at odds. And I would say that that is a very, very succinctly put how we are feeling about this at the Institute as well. I know then it raises the question for many of, well, where do I start? And who should I talk with? And you are not alone in feeling that way. It's a question and a conversation we have with many of our partners. But I think that starting with digital is a great place, and we have a lot of work that's already been done that I think can be leveraged quite quickly to move organizations towards that sustainability goal.
Great, thanks. Steve?
As soon as you get over the hump of how in the world is that going to happen here, when the corporate goal of 100% reduction in greenhouse gases happens, I think it's, once you get over that, then start asking the deeper questions about, well, how could we get there? And start flipping that question and start looking at a broader set of solutions that could possibly come to the table, and recognize that it's not always just the solutions that are available today. It's what are the solutions that are going to be in the picture in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, that are also part of that picture. So it's a deeper question, but I think you have to ask it.
Great, thanks. Kelly, Liz, Steve, Sean, thank you. Thanks to our sponsors again, and most importantly, thank you all to listening to us and joining the conversation. Thanks, have a great forum.